Hey guys, what's up? MadSeason here, back with another video for you. Though Vanilla World of Warcraft was a huge game on its release in 2004, it was only a fraction of the size it was envisioned to be, and we've been on a streak of discussing features and areas and philosophies that ended up on the cutting room floor, and today here we're going to do the same. The focus of this video will be on the long-lost Alpha 0.5.3 client, which was the very first version of the game made playable to people outside of Blizzard headquarters. I want to give a special thanks to Grender and the Alpha Team project for making this possible by using their mad coding skills, which you too may learn from the premier code teaching website, boot.dev. Boot.dev is a platform for anyone looking to master back-end development, and unlike my voice, it's built to make sure that you never get bored by taking cues from game design to keep you engaged and pushing towards a career in back-end development. You'll find courses here that teach you back-end web development using Python and Go, right from the basics to the more advanced concepts. The lessons are designed such that you're not just passively learning, you're actually coding, which is the best way to learn. And their mission is to make learning to code as engaging as possible. One of the reasons why I'm working with them is that their platform makes you feel like you're playing an RPG, which I'm sure will resonate with a lot of you considering that you're most likely addicted to World of Warcraft. It has levels to complete and achievements to unlock, and because it's self-paced, you can learn at your own speed. And if you hit a snag, don't worry, they have an AI to help, and they don't just give you the answers, but rather asking guided questions to help you understand concepts. They offer a 30-day, no questions asked refund policy, and a free demo for every course. So if it interests you, you can try it risk-free and see if it's the right fit for you. Click the link in the description and use my code to get 25% off your first payment, which is 25% off either your first month or your first year, depending on which plan you choose. Anyways, first up we have a feature. In vanilla, anybody who's at all familiar with the Hunter class knows that the different pet species in the game hold different unique abilities. The spiders can root people in place, the bird has an AoE threat generator, the wolf provides a melee attack power buff for party members, and beyond all of this, they also come with unique stats. And with the loyalty and training systems, they're arguably one of the most complex classes in vanilla. Well, as it turns out, this system functioned very differently in the alpha. To train different species at first, you had to track down these specialized trainers spread throughout the world that would give you the ability to tame them, as well as learn unique abilities such as for the spider, you can get a poison dot, the web which you know, and a ranged poison spit. As for the tall striders, they were more supportive, putting a debuff that increases damage taken, or healing a friendly target, or increasing regeneration rate. In general, they were much more unique than what they eventually landed on. How it worked was you learned the ability to train it from these trainers, and similar to the beast training skill in 1.0, the hunter would teach it to the pet once they reached the appropriate level. Although at this point there were no pet skill points that she had to allocate. But that's not the only difference. The class saw many changes throughout its development. Some of you may know that along with rogues, they could actually use bucklers. In the alpha there were two shield types, shields and bucklers, where the latter was a more lightweight version having less armor and block, giving these two classes a more defensive feel. Auto shot wasn't in, meaning that you had to manually shoot every single time, and the cast speed would match that of your ranged weapon. Many remember Focus as a cataclysm change, but it was indeed the first resource for hunters in this alpha. It would build slowly over time, and your abilities would consume it, and as for the abilities themselves, they're all quite different as well. Beast Call was a taunt that only worked on beasts, so maybe there was some sort of tanking capability planned for hunters at some point. As for Charm Beast, this would tame a beast for only 1 minute. Soothe Beast was a crowd control. True Shot wasn't an aura. It was an attack instead, costing 2 focus and adding some damage, and an additional 1 second cast time. Blinding Shot reduced your chance to hit. Fire Shot did some elemental fire damage. Quick Shot added 5 damage to a shot with a 1 minute cooldown. And Silencing Shot, which eventually turned up in the Burning Crusade, silenced the target for an insane 8 seconds, if you can actually believe that. Explosive Shot, which we saw in Wrath eventually, was in the alpha as well. This also did some AoE damage, and Sniper Shot added a whopping 5-second cast time to your weapon for some heavy damage, similar to Aimed Shot. Running Shot could be cast on the move. The closest thing we eventually got was Aspect of the Fox in Cataclysm, where you could use Steady Shot on the move. As for Frost Shot, this dealt some frost damage and also slowed your enemy, and Stalking was the early version of Hunter's Mark. Like with every class, there were no talents, as at this point it was the skill point system, so this, along with those pet abilities, was essentially their entire toolkit. There were no traps, there were no aspects, it was all quite bare bones, which makes sense because hunters were the last class that was added to the game for vanilla. Next, doing an area, the Scarlet Monastery is perhaps one of the most memorable dungeons in vanilla. It's split up into 4 wings, the graveyard, library, armory, and cathedral, and it's often the first thing that people think of when they think of vanilla dungeons. The bosses are memorable, the loot is really good, the XP is pretty decent, and the lore is interesting. But this was all the result of a lot of hard work and a huge makeover, as in the alpha, it was all one big dungeon, with just one entrance at the bottom of the stairs leading into the monastery, which is even blocked off by a couple of gates, which possibly indicates that there may have been plans for an attunement or a key required to gain entry. So the first difference you'll notice is that the entrance to the library and graveyard are missing, and the cathedral and armory paths are actually the same hallway, so right away it's a very linear dungeon compared to the updated version. Turning the corner, we have the library. Over to the right is the Houndmaster and his hounds, but going through the next area, we find that it goes right instead of left, and right around the corner, we have the Wish.com version of MadSeason. Herod. Yeah, really, you do actually enter his room from the bottom floor here, right after the Houndmaster, which is pretty wild, and you probably noticed that he had a wardrobe change. I guess this is before he flexed off all of his armor. A little fun fact here is that this red-winged helmet that he's wearing was actually the original Lightbringer helmet model, and I remember this because my first 60 back in the day was a Paladin, and I thought it was so cool looking, but by the time I got it, they changed it to the McDonald's hat, which was pretty disappointing. Anyways, moving past him up the stairs that used to be the entrance to his room, the hallway leads left instead of right, and at the end of the hallway you can go left or right. Going left leads to the graveyard. You may recognize this as Interrogator Vicious's room, who switched tables, and as you can see, the Undead Quest Giver is also missing. And following through here, we have another long hallway, and where you would normally expect that big courtyard with a lot of undead wandering about, eventually leading to the Blood Mage Thalnos inside his crypt, you'll instead find a copy of that little square in library that held the Houndmaster. So his house got quite the upsize in the new version. But going back to the fork in the road and going right this time, we find the library, and where Thalnos had a smaller room, Doan doesn't even have a room at all. He's not in this version, and the next room is instead the final cathedral with Mograine and Whitemane. The main difference being is that there's some benches added, along with various other little changes, such as Mograine being gray-haired, and Whitemane, who is hatless.
Suspect is hatless. Repeat, hatless.
You can also find Inquisitor Fairbanks hanging out in his room, although they haven't installed the secret bookshelf yet. So in terms of square footage and mob density, it's much smaller than the 4-wing update that was eventually released. I think the 4-wing version was a big improvement, so kudos to the developers for that. But it is interesting to see all of these bosses right next to each other, sort of like an alternate reality Scarlet Monastery. Next we have Death, Resurrection, and XP, which all worked a little bit differently in this alpha. In the final version, as you know, when you died, you lost 10% equipped durability, and you'd spawn in ghost form to the nearest spirit healer, where you had the option of either running back to your corpse or rezzing at the spirit healer for a 10-minute debuff and an additional 25% durability hit to all of your gear in your bags, not just your equipped items. However, in the alpha, you would instead set your revive point to an NPC known as a binder, and if you ever died, no matter where you were, you would revive at this binder, as well as lose some experience. As you may know, one of the game's selling points was that it was much more casual friendly compared to other games in the genre at the time, so they would eventually do away with this XP loss and replace it with the fatigue system, where the more you adventured, the more you fatigued your character, reducing the amount of XP you gained. You could still rest by logging off in an inn or major city to recover it, which would eventually give you times 2 XP, and you had normal, which is times 1, but if you played too much, you would get fatigued, which would be half, and then exhausted was a quarter. This was all eventually done away with because it just discouraged playing too much, and it forced grinding as players would just simply run out of quests. Since this was before players had widespread knowledge of the game and these advanced database websites, even without penalties, making it to 60 usually required some form of mob grinding or dungeon spam to some extent, so this was a little bit too punishing for what they were going for, and they eventually got rid of the penalties, but they did keep the ×2 rested bonus. And next, going over various locations and references that were removed. This is quite a popular one. The first is the Statue of Liberty in Stranglethorn Vale on Jaguaro Island, which was the spot where you did that Donkey Kong reference quest for Princess Muba. You could also find the Statue of Liberty, clearly unfinished because I don't particularly remember it being hot pink, but this is a reference to the movie The Planet of the Apes. Spoiler alert, but the story goes that a group of astronauts go on a space mission, and after an accident, they crash land on this planet filled with intelligent evolved apes who hunt down humans for sport and slavery. And at the end, the protagonist, Taylor, finds the half-buried Statue of Liberty, revealing that they had traveled into the future to this post-apocalyptic Earth after the world's superpowers blew it up. It was one of the many commentaries on the Cold War. In the last one, we did a little tour of Alpha Ironforge, which was wildly different. So I figured we'd do the same with Stormwind here, which holds some differences. Not as extreme, but there are some notable ones, such as first noticing that the lighting and the torches are a bit different. The bridge leading to the stockades is really steep for some reason, and there's now a river that covers that spot between the trade district and the mage quarter, making it harder to navigate. You can't jump in the water in this version of the game, which makes sense if you think about it, but it's also pretty annoying as you have to swim all the way to the little pier to get back up. They eventually changed it because people were falling in water in certain spots of the game and were getting themselves stuck with no way out. As it happens, this was also before Hearthstones were added into the game, so they would either have a GM get them out or essentially abandon their character. In the park, there's a Tall Strider trainer for hunters, and in the Dwarven district, a Raptor trainer, and the entrance to the Deep Run tram is blocked off like I mentioned in the last video. The auction house is missing, which was actually true for the 1.0 release as well. Initially, only Ironforge and Orgrimmar had auction houses, and they were later added to other cities, and they weren't even linked until a certain patch, meaning that the ones in Darnassus and Thunderbluff would be pretty barren of items most of the time. The bank in the trade district is much larger than the version we eventually got, and the portal in the Mage Tower is gone. I guess they needed to add a little more room for NPCs at some point. And in the keep, you'll find that Onyxia, aka Lady Prestor, is replaced by Devil Prestor II, and Bolvar is cosplaying as Colonel Curzon from Stranglethorn. In Old Town, we see that the PvP hall is missing, with some rogue vendors who just kind of took up shop where it used to be, and the SI7 building isn't even there yet, holding just this open courtyard with Matthias Shaw just hanging out. The same is true for the Warrior building. Right now it's just this open area with a few trainers here and there. There's a bunch of other tiny, minor differences here and there that you can probably spot if you have a keen eye, but I think that about wraps up this episode. There's plenty more to show you in this alpha, I assure you. There's so many changes in these areas and balance and everything, and it's all really interesting, so I will for sure be returning to this at a later point. Thanks for watching. Like the video if you liked it, because I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Farewell for now, mortals. We hope you enjoyed today's video. See you again soon.